So you're lying in bed with your Haru Suzumiya body pillow, one hand down your pants, the other reaching for lube, and you're asking yourself, God damn it, why can't normies appreciate the Monogatari series? It's just so good. You want to recommend it to people, but you know they just wouldn't understand why the main character fucks his sister with a toothbrush. The problem is, not everyone has tastes as refined as you and I. So here's a little guide on how to justify these instances of fan service using good old textual analysis. Let's start this in a strange place, with Quentin Tarantino. Tarantino once described his style like this.
While I say I've outgrown Godard, I haven't outgrown Pauline Kael's reviews of Godard. And the most influential piece of film criticism I've ever read of my aesthetic that applied to me. And I'm reading her review of Band of Outsiders, also known as Band Apart, which I named my company after. She's reviewing Godard's movie, and she says, it's as if a couple of movie crazy young Frenchmen were in a coffee house, and they've taken a banal American crime novel and they're making a movie out of it based not on the novel but on the poetry that they read between the lines. And when I read that, I was like, that's my aesthetic. That's what I want to do. That is what I want to achieve.
Okay, so here's my hot take. Nishio Isin is the Tarantino of anime. Well, the Tarantino of light novels technically, but who cares? The same way Tarantino finds the poetry between the lines, Nishio Isin finds the poetry between the anime titties, where Tarantino manages to take all this trashy imagery from Pulp Fiction of the 40s and 50s and exploitation films from the 60s and 70s, Nishio Isin finds the beauty in these trashy anime tropes and manages to extract meaningful character arcs and interesting themes from these trashy anime tropes. I think the best place to start in order to explain what I mean by all of this is with one of Monogatari's biggest offenders, Hanekawa. Now, I want to talk about 3 instances of Hanekawa fan service moments, all 3 of them from the Kizumonogatari movies. An important aspect of these movies is the introduction and development of Araragi and Hanekawa's relationship. This is a prequel set before Bakemonogatari, so its job is to set up their friendship and clue us into why exactly they became friends in the first place. Okay, so enough chit chat, let's talk about Hanekawa's panties. We all know what Araragi and Hanekawa's first encounter is. They cross paths in the street and a gust of wind blows Hanekawa's skirt up, revealing her underwear to Araragi. So what's the point of this scene? What's the thematic significance? Well, at first it seems pretty random and gratuitous, but it's only when this scene is put into the context of the next 2 scenes that I'm going to be talking about that it gains meaning. Indeed, we have 2 more major scenes involving Hanekawa's panties in these movies. The next one comes in the second movie when Hanekawa willingly shows Koyomi her underwear, and the third scene we'll be talking about appears towards the end of the second movie when Hanekawa actually gives Koyomi her underwear, telling him,
貸してあげる。新学期に会った時返してね。
So what the fuck is going on here? Well, this is Nishio Isin tracking the development of a relationship through the use of what appears to be gratuitous fan service. Imagine you're watching an artsy movie about a relationship. The 3 times these 2 characters appear on screen, they're symbolically associated with, like a flower or something. Each time they interact, we see the flower in the background at different stages of growth. In the first scene, the flower has just burgeoned because their relationship has just begun. In their second scene, we see the flower is in full bloom because their relationship is at its peak. But in the last scene, we see that the flower is dead, which symbolizes the end of their relationship. And then you watch a shitty video essay where a guy explains all that to you with lo-fi hip-hop playing in the background. Something like that. So this is basically the same thing that's happening in these movies. But obviously, when Nishio Isin does this, he doesn't get the same level of respect because he does it with teenagers' underwear instead of some kind of highbrow artistic symbol. But hey, it's just as beautiful as a symbolic flower. So what are these 3 scenes telling us about these 2 characters' developing dynamic exactly? Well, it's pretty simple. The first time Koyomi sees her panties, it's out of her control. It's caused by the wind, so it's embarrassing for her. so Koyomi has the upper hand. He has the advantage in their dynamic. The second time, however, she's the one who shows him, but she does it because Koyomi asked her to, and she sees this as the only way of making up with him and maintaining their relationship, so she does it. Of course, Koyomi didn't really expect her to actually do it, and being the gentleman he is, he stops her. This shows the lengths to which she's willing to go to be Koyomi's friend, and also clues us into the fact that she's starting to develop feelings for him. But then, in the third scene, she gives him her underwear. This time she chooses to do it. She's in control, and she's doing it so that Koyomi doesn't forget her. She wants to remain in his thoughts until they get to see each other again at school. And she's doing that the only way she knows how, by using her panties. The thing that started their relationship, the one thing she knows Koyomi is interested in. So it's kind of her way of regaining some control in this dynamic of theirs, where Koyomi has up to this point had more power than her, which was shown in the second scene by having Koyomi literally staged above Hanekawa on the steps. So here we see Nishiyori-san using fan service for characterization and to develop the character's dynamic. We see another similar example of this in the last episode of Tsuki Monogatari, when Koyomi and Ononoki are walking up the mountain and Koyomi just lifts Ononoki's skirt up. In the beginning it's played off as just being a comedic scene, but we don't even see up her skirt, so I guess it's not even really fan service, to be honest, but it does seem just kind of gratuitously perverted. But then the scene goes on, and he's still holding her skirt up, and over the course of the scene, their dynamic changes. Koyomi goes from seeing Ononoki as a soulless doll to seeing her as an actual person who experiences shame like everyone else, and he ends up letting go of the skirt when she asks him to. And we feel how their dynamic has changed. Koyomi now respects Ononoki a bit more, and so do we. A character who was kind of just a meme before has now been humanized. So yeah, these fanservice-y moments can be used to develop characters' relationships. But in this show, these types of scenes are also used to progress the plot, and sometimes even deliver some pretty interesting thematic moments. Sticking with Tsuki Monogatari, there's an earlier scene where Koyomi bathes with his younger sister, Tsukihi. Now, before we get started on this one, let's just reiterate that, for some reason, incest is pretty big in anime. The fact that the younger sister who's in love with her Oni-chan is actually a trope in anime is just kind of fucking weird, but hey, it is one, and we've all got to accept that. And like I was saying earlier, Nishiyori-san seems to enjoy extracting interesting narrative elements from what appear to be trashy anime tropes, and I think this is just another instance of that. At first, the scene does seem pretty gratuitous, but the scene just goes on, and there's a point where Tsukihi says this.
ていうかお兄ちゃん、受験勉強の方は実際のところどうなの？あと勉強1ヶ月でなんとかなりそうなの？
なんとかはなりそうかな。
こんなところで妹の体を洗っている場合なの？
And this idea of Koyomi distracting himself from the things he should really be dealing with is one of the central themes of the show. Like Nishiyori-san himself has stated, Bakemonogatari is a story about the affirmation of the present. It's a story of people who will look at their current situation, accept it, and say, this is fine, just as it is, in a negative sense. So to speak, it is a story where things aren't clearly settled or come to an end. So it's a story about people in denial about their current issues. So this fanservice-y anime scene is being used as a narrative device to tell us about the idea of this main character who can't face his problems, who's running away from his responsibilities. So this fanservice is a distraction, not just for us, but for the character too. And the show is acknowledging that. So it's sort of a meta use of the fanservice in a sense. And that's why a scene where the main character bathing with his younger sister isn't just what you think it is. It's not fan service, I swear. And I think that's the big distinction between how most anime do fan service and how the Monogatari series does it. In these scenes that I'm talking about, they always seem gratuitous at first. But the more you think about them, the more you realize that they're never just fan service. They're always adding to the story in some way. Similar things can be said about Nadeko's first arc in Bakemonogatari, which many fans dismiss as being the weakest arc of the first season and nothing more than pure, unadulterated fan service. And while I can understand this sentiment, I disagree with the idea that this is just gratuitous fan service.
小読お兄ちゃんはもう大人だからなでこの裸を見ていやらしい気持ちになったりはしないんだよね。
ああ、そんなの当たり前じゃないか。なあカンパル。
しかしどうだろう、荒木先輩。
It's just a matter of understanding what's going on underneath the surface, on a narrative and thematic level. What's interesting about Nadeko's arc is that her issues stem from how other people perceive her. While it is revealed that she did, in fact, accidentally activate the curse herself by trying to remove it, her problems originate from the curses placed on her by the classmates she rejected. So her issues seem to come from the outside, rather than from within, which is the case for most of the other characters affected by oddities. And this makes sense, because Nadeko's arc is all about her image, how she is perceived by others. And while it's true that this is explored in more depth in second season, the thematic seeds of this character arc are already firmly in place in her first arc. The serpents wrapping themselves around her body simply being an external representation of how Nadeko's image of a cute girl who never speaks up for herself or defies anyone and prefers to lie to herself about her own dreams and desires because she cares too much about what others will think of her is the very thing that's constricting her. Fan service in Monogatari is usually justified. Nishio-san always talks about how he's writing these stories for himself and they're just silly conversations that play to his tastes and his interests. And that's pretty obvious. But what makes him a good writer is that he manages to find thematically relevant reasons for this self-indulgence. And justified self-indulgence is the opposite of gratuitous. Similar to how Tarantino gets away with his perversions, Nishio-san gets away with all of his crap too, because Tarantino and Nishio-san's process is a transformative one, taking the lowbrow, sometimes very, very lowbrow, and making it highbrow. So yeah, I guess my point is, don't judge a Monogatari scene by its apparent use of gratuitous fan service. Okay, at this point you might be thinking, but wait, you didn't even mention the toothbrush scene. Yeah, that's true. But I don't think I really need to analyze this scene. We all know what's going on. We all know what it's all about. It's just a brother and sister resolving a disagreement. You know? Like brothers and sisters do. Jesus. This scene. What the fuck, man?